Good morning, beautiful people of the Center for Spiritual Living. I am so grateful that we have completed the month on Thanksgiving. I can't even say the word. We've just spent a whole month on forgiveness, and I'm so grateful that we're done. And I'm grateful because it's actually worth the difficult work that goes into it. It's worth doing it, and I'm glad it's done. And what follows a month of forgiveness work is gratitude. It just seeps in from every direction, you'll see. You heard that this is our theme for this month, practicing gratitude. And our tradition now is we launch the spiritual practice that we're focusing on for the month on our first Wednesday evening service. That's what we do. And at that first Wednesday evening service, we give away a free spiritual resource booklet. That's our way of getting you to attend, and then you can be enrolled to practice right away from the first Wednesday. But it's okay if you can't make the first Wednesday evening service. We also make the booklet available free to download online at our website. You can go to our website and look on the right-hand column. There's a section entitled Files for You, and you can download it from the spiritual resource section. And if you prefer a hard copy, we also sell them very inexpensively at the bookstore. But if you don't prefer to do either of those two things, you can still see the invitation to participate on our Facebook page. We're really trying to make our practice of the month very accessible to everyone. And what the practice is for this month is something really delightful, easy, innocent, natural. Anybody can do it. You don't need any prerequisites. You don't need any special education. It's something that can come very easily to us as soon as we invoke it as a practice. So in the booklet, you're invited every day. You can see I've started every day to make a list of 10 things that you're grateful for related to the day's topic. So I bet some of you have started this already. How many are already doing this? So you know what today's topic is. Thank you, Betty. Your body parts. It says list 10 body parts that you're grateful for. And I sat there with it and I went, all right, I'm feeling all sorts of discomfort with this, because of the social convention not to celebrate yourself. Not to look at your body. So I'm already getting a lot out of this. And I started writing down, and I thought, I'm going to have to write this down in code in case somebody picks it up, Yeah, do you ever do that? Right. And then early on, and the first one was people in my life for whom I'm grateful. And I thought, again, what if somebody finds this and they're not in number one position? So I wrote all of my best friends over each other on the top line. So can you see it's already working me, this program? It's really working me deeply, and it's such a beautiful practice. And the idea is for you and I to commit to do it for 30 days. It's not very intensive, very easy to do at the end or the beginning of the day, but something wonderful will happen. Gratitude is one of the practices. It's right up there with giving, practices that I have supreme confidence in. I am sure that something beautiful will begin to emerge in your life if you do this for 30 days. Well, it's in part inspired by the story of John Kralik, the author of 365 Thank Yous, who himself proved it by having his life change dramatically by writing a thank you card every single day of the year for a whole year. And it tells the dramatic story of what took place in his life. This is what it says in the sleeve of his book, 365 Thank Yous. One recent December, at age 53, John found his life at a terrible and frightening low. His small law firm was failing. He was struggling through a painful second divorce. He had grown distant from his two older children and was afraid he might lose contact with his young daughter. He was living in a tiny apartment in which he froze during the winter in it and boiled during the summer in it. And he was 40 pounds overweight, and his new relationship recently broke up with him too, leaving him all dismayed and confused. And let's see. There were a whole bunch of things. His dearest dreams were going out of the window. He was an attorney, and his top client that he won a settlement for $140,000. Upon receiving the settlement, transferred it out of the country and refused to pay him anything. And then it gets worse. His landlord decides that he couldn't anymore have his law firm where he had, and so he didn't have money to meet payroll or to move It's just one of those moments where there's no place. Have you ever been there? There's nowhere lower I can go. So that's where the story starts. And so he finds himself terribly lost, and then one day during a desperate hike, it was on New Year's Day, in the hills above Pasadena, he was struck by the belief that his life might become at least tolerable if instead of focusing on what he didn't have, he could find some way to be grateful for what he had. And right there is the shift that this whole practice is entirely about. And I look at that shift with humility and respect, because sometimes when we are in that very dark place, making that shift towards acknowledging gratitude, what's working, it's easier to talk about than it is to do it. So it's with great humility when I can't make that shift, or when you and I see each other not make, we just hold each other high and for the hope that one day we will be able to make it, because it's in that shift that beautiful things have their way into our life. And he lays down a pathway for us to at least experiment with doing. So he was inspired by a beautiful, simple note that his ex-girlfriend had sent him to thank him for a Christmas gift. And he imagined that he might find a way to feel grateful by writing thank you notes every day of the year. He set out on this goal. Come what may, I'm going to write 365 notes for the coming year. And fortunately for him, one of the things he did have going for him, one of the support staff in the office, I think it was his secretary, had purchased enough stationery that he had all of these thank you notes so that he could do the task, and he set about it. So one by one, day after day, he began to handwrite thank you notes for gifts of kindnesses he had received from loved ones and co-workers, from past business associates, and even current foes, from college friends and doctors and store clerks and handymen and neighbors and anyone, really, absolutely anyone who had done him a good turn. In fact, he talks about how the process of looking for whom to write a thank you note for sometimes was challenging. He calls it extreme gratitude. You had to really sit and think around for those moments. Who am I going to thank right now? And immediately, he writes, after I sent the very first note, significant, sometimes surprising benefits began to come his way. And that is the way of gratitude. Things he couldn't expect, and sometimes things he could expect. And the whole range from financial reversals, financial gain, the realization of people in his life that he hadn't noticed were there supporting him, the reaffirmation of deep, deep, abiding friendship and amazing support. And all of this increase took place while the economy was plummeting. And the bank across the street from his law firm was closing down. So all the outer signs were decreased, and he was starting to experience this increase in his life in amazing ways. Now, gratitude, I said, is one of the things I'm deeply convinced in. And I'm convinced that it can have this effect in your life too, that it had in his life. Our center has a reputation for being a thank you note writing center. Among other centers for spiritual living and my colleagues, there's a joke that if you sneeze, we'll write a thank you card, And people tell me, some people, they say, when we got that note, that thank you note, or that note saying we were thinking of you, and all the staff will sign it. We can't acknowledge everything, but we keep at it. Some people say it made the difference for them. In a day, it gave them the courage they needed to carry on. It helped them reconnect to their humanity, to their community. All these things, they say, just the simple act of writing a card, how important it is. We have this one woman in our center who is a very generous contributor. She writes a check every single week for a huge amount of money. And so every week I write her a thank you card. And one day in the social hall, she cornered me and she said, Edward, and because we're friends, she said, Edward, I don't need that thank you card. And because we're friends, I was able to say to her, honey, it's not for you. Right? It's for me. It's because I don't ever want to lose sight of my gratitude for what's happening. I don't ever want to take for granted what is flowing. I'm going to write thank you notes whether you like it or not. I said, you can just shred them. I can't control how you will receive it, but I can, through absent-mindedness, lose sight of my gratitude. I can. I don't want to do that. Especially because what our teaching says right there in the classwork, in our founder's own words, it said, gratitude is the motive power of the universe. Can you hear that? Motive power. It means it's what makes everything go. That's what makes everything go. Gratitude. I don't want to forget that. I don't ever lose sight of that. So we are a thank you writing center. We write it until we can't stand it. So we can check in with this story and our author to see what happened on that hike above the hills in Pasadena that made him choose this assignment. Here's what happened. I heard a voice. And the voice said, until you learn to be grateful for the things you have, you will not receive the things you want. Wow. And he said, I do not know who spoke to me. I could not explain the voice or the words it said, which seemed to have no logical relationship to anything else going on in my head. But anyway, he paid attention and he made that decision to come down from the hill and start writing thank you notes. And what I did was I went through and I collected the key ideas that I think relate to our spiritual practice so we can take from it something valuable and adapt it in a larger way to our own lives. So here are the key ideas. Number one, handwriting the notes also took me back to first grade when I'd labored over the Palmer method. Who of you remember that? And how many people's handwritings got suffered as a result? I'm going to get letters about that. He says, my handwriting had degenerated into scribbling over the years, and because of this practice of writing cards, it started to improve because he made legibility an important part of the practice. And so he turned the card writing into something more like a prayer and a meditation. He says because he wanted the person receiving to be able to read it, right? There's the first point, mindfulness. Mindfulness in spiritual practice. You know, a few months ago we said our practice for the month was going to be meditation. And it occurred to me that in meditation we close our eyes. But it's not that we close our eyes that meditation works. It's how we close our eyes. It's the same in everything. It's not that I'm alive, it's how I live. In other words, it's the attitude and mindfulness with which I engage in the practice that has everything to do with what I get out of it. And it's the same thing with the letter writing. He brought a mindfulness, which is why he says, it's difficult to do this sort of thing in a mindful way with email. Because email has a personality and a character of its own. It's characterized by short and sometimes thoughtless communication, mass communication. So although I can see some people might have a challenge writing, you can express gratitude in any way, but he turned this into a meditation, a spiritual practice that he probably got as much out of the doing of it as the people got out of receiving it. Here's the second thing he said. After a half hour of writing thank you notes, the murk of my fear, upset, and self-pity seemed to dissipate, and I often felt just a little better. There's the second point from our teaching. A change of focus in our awareness, our attention, changes the thoughts that rise up into our experience. It's very difficult to change what you're thinking about, but I can change where I'm looking. And wherever I'm looking, my thoughts rise up from that. So if I'm only looking in one certain thing, my thoughts seem to take the character of that thing, and then it has the self-perpetuating motion going on. So we're not denying the world in this practice, but we're broadening our gaze to look also at those things that are beautiful, like the people in our lives, like the beings in our lives, like the little things that are easily taken for granted, like the air that we breathe. That's the second point. The third thing is, one of the most comforting aspects of writing a thank you note was that it produced a tangible product. I was creating something that I was going to be contributing, sending out into the world. He was making something physical, and he felt engaged. That's the third point. Being engaged in a practice, the doing of it is so powerful, because otherwise we just spend our time thinking about our spiritual practice. And our theme this year? What's our theme? Practice, practice, practice. It's not think about it, think about it, think about it. Right? So the doing of the thing has in it a beautiful treasure to release that cannot be released by only thinking about it. Fourth thing. During the time I worked on thank you notes, I was focused on other people's lives instead of mine. As I gave more thought to whom I would be sending my next note, I realized just how many people I had neglected to be grateful for. There's something from our teachings to expand the view, like we were just mentioning. When you're having difficulty, pray for other people. Look to other people and contribute in thought and prayer and meditation, and watch something beautiful take place. Watch strands of love and compassion rise up. If you look to other people and examine their lives and what courage it takes for them to live it and the goodness that is in them, I assure you these strands of compassion and connectivity and beauty will just rise up out of your contemplation with no effort exerted whatsoever. It's the way of things. We are very, very beautiful. And he says, one of the people that I'd neglected to be grateful for, surprisingly, was my apartment building manager, Mr. Robert. And he tells the story about Mr. Robert. He's this gruff apartment manager, and the sort of person who's always inserting himself into the tenant's business, and then knocking on their door at inopportune times and explaining in overly minute detail about every single, taking too much time, taking up too much space. That's how he experienced him. But he remembered the practice. And so he didn't want to let himself off the hook. So he wrote the apartment manager a thank you note, and he has the content of it right over here. Dear Mr. Robert, that's the man. Thank you for responding so promptly to my concern. It always seems a little ridiculous when the concern is about a toilet. So thank you for taking me seriously. With the water turned way down, everything is fine now, and it sure is a lot easier to sleep. Best, John in apartment X. And in that, he gives us also the anatomy of a thank you note. Short, sincere, clearly states the gift and explains the appreciation, and then goes off, moves on, drive by. It's not overly effusive. It's not. It doesn't insert or control the person. Gratitude can be used in a way that is intrusive too. When you make it more about your self-expression than about the gift given. Yeah, I'm kind of shy. I know I stand in front of people and speak, but I'm shy in close-up encounters. And sometimes people will grab me with their attention and their gaze, and they'll insist that I listen to them. I really need you to hear this. And I'm already shut down. It's like I can't hear it because I'm now in my cave. What I love about a note writing practice is I can't control how you will receive it. That's what makes it so clean and lovely. And when it's short and beautiful, it seems like less is more. There's something so beautiful about it coming through that way, as we will hear in just a moment. One of the things he also discovered with this Mr. Robert was that he didn't know, he had judged him as being, grouchy and difficult. He didn't know that the man was dying, because a week later he did die from liver cancer. He had been waiting unsuccessfully for a transplant, and he just said in the book, I had been misjudging this grouchy man all this time. And he said, I was so grateful that in my last communication with him that I didn't. That the last encounter I had with him was a genuine, non-controlling, non-invasive gratitude. It touched me very deeply reading that. He says also that things started to change in his life as this practice deepened in him. Like, for example, one of the things that changed was how he tended to answer the question, how are you? Here's what he says. By the end of February, that's just 2 months in, when somebody asked, how are you? Instead of reporting the latest development in one of my struggles, I noted something for which I was grateful. Even if I was just making payroll that week or keeping my business open, I would state it. Often I mentioned that my youngest was doing well in school. She was always doing well in school, but it had just occurred to me through the practice that I could enjoy that with relief and delight and consider it a success. Mention it. The new way of responding to how are you doing happened unconsciously, but after I noticed it, I decided that it would be something that I would keep on doing. Sometimes people, when I say to them, how are you, they'll say to me, well, I want to be authentic when I answer this question. And I'll go, okay. You do know it's just a social convention, right? But it occurred to me that, this practice is so beautiful, and it reminded me that as practicing metaphysicians, that when somebody asks you and me, how are you, there is only one answer. If we are to tell the truth, of course stuff is happening. Where doesn't it happen? Do you know anybody right now who isn't challenged on the planet? So there's only one thing going on as a metaphysician, and it's not being glib. Say, how are you? The answer is, mighty fine. Because the truth of my being is, thank God I'm alive. I am a lens of consciousness out into this festival of chaos. Right? And stuff is going on. So when you ask me, how are you? You see me smile because I'm laughing. I'm laughing because I was like, yeah, I'm fantastic. If you've got 6 hours, I will tell you the rest. So let's check in with what happened as a result. We'll move forward to 6 months into the year because, I'm reading the book and I'm wanting miracles to happen, right? I'm wanting all sorts of fantastic things to happen for him and turn around. Awesome, awesome. So I check in 6 months. He said, my life continued to be vexing. I wasn't expecting that. And difficult for much of the coming year. Here's the part I was waiting for. But I would never again question whether it was worth living. That's something. I started paying attention to everything. He said even when he crossed the street, he started to sense how much he'd been missing. He wanted to notice everything. And the people around him, the power of this practice of gratitude, it's contagious. It has within it, I call it the power of multiplication because, when you put it out, you get back more than you put out. It's just the way of gratitude. It was contagious in his office as he was writing thank you notes to his co-workers. They started writing thank you notes to each other. And then they started to copy him on the thank you notes because that's where it started. Before he knew it, everybody's smiling and happy. even though they're being kind of evicted and having to meet in the hallway. Right? So outer signs may decline, inner signs rise. See? I am not a product of what's happening out in the world of chaos. That's never been the truth of our being. Oh, the innocence of practicing gratitude. So easy. And the power of it. Many people wrote to him and told him how much they loved that and what a difference it made, how they would receive a thank you card and keep it. Even his daughter kept one of them. One of the most touching ones was an encounter he had at Starbucks with a barista. And the story is this. Her name is Kimber. She came to me the next time I saw her, and she had tears in her eyes. She had spent years, she said, studying and working in the service industry. Although she had just earned her degree, she was beginning to doubt her choice. She provided service that would definitely have made her professors proud, and she worked very hard at it every day, trying to deliver the Starbucks coffee experience in the optimum way as she had been taught, which included learning people's names and treating them like they were people. Yet, she said, no one had ever taken the time to write her a thank you note, and it moved her to tears. He wrote to everybody, courtroom clerks, to the neighbor who found his $10 in the passage, and instead of calling it her lucky day, put it on a note and stuck it under his door, and to school teachers, to everybody. And by the end of June, he said he was receiving in more notes than he could write out. The law of multiplication, I'll call that. It reminds me of what our founder wrote about gratitude in our textbook on page 497. He's talking about the idea of praying without ceasing, being in prayer constantly, because that's what we're about. Spiritual living means not just Sunday morning, but my life is lived in a spiritual way. So what do I need to bring into it? He says this is one of the things. In everything, give thanks. An attitude of gratitude is most salutary. Here's such a way with words. It's healthy. And it bespeaks the realization that we are now in heaven. Oh, how we love to do for those who cooperate with us and who are grateful for our small endeavors. Well, gratitude is one of the chief graces of human existence. The chief grace. It's right there. The chief. And it is crowned in heaven with a consciousness of unity. Oh, he had a way with words. The chiefest grace you're invited to think of this month, your chiefest grace, your highest attainment for the month, is your ability to give expression to your gratitude. Let us pray. We heard in the opening prayer there's only one life, and we resonate back to that to reconnect with it. One life, the ground of all being, the thing itself, the creator, that from which everything rises up. The source of all is the mind from which creation emerges. It is the seen and the unseen. It is the all in all. And there is nothing to rise up to oppose it, because it seamlessly integrates and incorporates and causes everything. I use these words to help point my awareness to that which is eternal, meaning it was never made and will never cease to be. To point to that which is everywhere present, omnipresent, I say, meaning that it is here. Wherever here is, And so I speak this in my prayer so that I may be reminded that this time and this place is my home. This is where I'm supposed to be for this particular moment of eternity. And as I bring my awareness to gaze upon that, my thought of gratitude rises up. And it infects me with a joy. It lifts me up, and not only me, but all of those who pray together with me in this way. And as we are lifted up together, that joy that rises up naturally from us without any effort or control whatsoever establishes a platform of happiness and relief and serenity for all people everywhere. And so I do give thanks for that and release this word of prayer, trusting the law of mind to return to us further experiences and opportunities to connect, to love, and to serve, and to be at home in heaven now. And so it is. I invite you to breathe in with me and to sigh. Ah.